All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Public Comment. We are bringing back a guest that's going to be here often because this man is studying the pulse and the beat of city council. He's in the mix. Definitely some things that we're talking about. We really opening up with the story that I think is really getting some national attention for a reason. We're talking about lock-ins at gas stations. Further to do, or no further to do for that. Malachi Barrett, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, good. Everything is well. Everything is well. So let's talk a little bit about this whole concept and what's going on with this story. And it seems to have like captured more hearts and minds. Sometimes this bothers me as it can be such a distraction. But what's happening with this whole gas station locks and so forth and so on?
Yeah.
Speaking into this about everything. Detroit police chief supports ban on gas station door locks. And you had a picture of Chief White.
Yeah, this was during a conversation. He came in and talked to our newsroom. So this was, something that was kind of fresh on our mind. It was actually the same day. I mean, a couple hours later, the clerk was charged with involuntary manslaughter. So that's still an ongoing situation here. We're trying to figure out exactly, what happened. But yeah, the chief is in favor of. He doesn't. I mean, like Tate said, he doesn't really see a justification for locking people inside of a building.
And see, this is where I guess for people that have lived here for a long time, this is just a known fact that gas stations have this locking capacity. I would assume that this is a part of the security and safety measures of any gas station. In reality, the way I've seen it done usually is like a bunch of kids. So, come in a gas station after school, want to steal take some chips and candy, stuff kids may do. And to stop that from happening, because most gas stations, I don't know if people know this, but most gas stations, the money they're making is actually off of the more so the convenience store portion of it, more so than even supplying the gas. And this is something that I've known, which the next question just becomes like when we spoke about this, the big question becomes, how do you enforce something like this?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not about just the rule. It's like, how do you enforce it when we know that I would think that a strong majority, probably like 90% or higher of gas stations throughout the city of Detroit have this mechanism to lock their doors. So is that going to be one of those things where the city is now going to pay like building engineers with police officers to go to every gas station across the city to change this? Where does the money come? Like, how will it be monitored? Will it just be one of those things enforceable after the fact, like a DUI type of thing? Like, okay, when you get caught in a situation like this, when it's known, then from there forward, we're going to penalize you. Like, is it going to be a tax? Is this an ordinance type thing? Will penalties be law? Like, will somebody serve time? Like, what does this look like becomes the bigger question. And then that's also the other point of this whole matter. It's like, how will they enforce it? But more so than them enforcing it, the bigger question becomes, do they have capacity to enforce it?
Right.
Are that's where this budget and where things go already make a city like Detroit so much more difficult. And that's what this program is really looking to delve into and decide and open up people's minds to the ideas, in my opinion, that decisions are being made about when laws and ordinances will be enforced and how they'll be enforced, because it's not enough resources to enforce it all.
Right.
So then comes to what order, even that, like, do you start with the east side gas stations first or the west side gas stations? Do you start with the new gas stations or the old gas stations? If I'm a person that owns 25 gas stations, because some people own multiple locations, am I going to, deal with the same thing as that person that owns one gas station? Like, it's back to rules look great on the books, but how you enforce them has a whole lot to do with just the science of the execution of this.
Yeah,
and something like this, I think, could become a tougher thing to really enforce.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough to consider that they would be able to add new rules when the current rules aren't being followed, right? This gas station was unlicensed by the rules of the city, by the licensing requirements, by BC. If they were doing
so
what they
clearly
were supposed to be
doing, the building permissions of just regular building permissions aren't there.
Yeah.
So let alone
so that gas
something
station
like
shouldn't
a
have been
rule.
open in the first place, right?
Wow.
So to say let's add more rules on top of this when the current rules aren't really being followed, I mean, I think that's worth talking about. There's some other solutions that folks have been kicking around. I talked with Khary Brent, longtime local community activist. He's actually you can remind me, what's the name of the organization that he's involved with?
Oh man, like I think he works with Force Detroit. He works Reverend for Fellowship Chapel. I know him as Chaos from Chaos and Maestro, but shout out to Khary.
Yeah, so he said that they've actually been training gas station employees across the city on conflict de-escalation, on kind of different. I mean, I think there's a real cultural conversation that needs to happen there too. I mean, just to paint with a broad brush. We've got an African-American majority here in the city that's being served by, primarily Arab American people who are at the gas station. That's my,
I mean,
that's
just the truth. That, the ownership of a lot of our retail space that inside these black communities, it's not owned by black people. So there are many cultural misunderstandings that happen, and depending upon the gas station and what's upkept, that can even have its own backgrounds of interpersonal beliefs. And not to mention, there are many gas stations that after certain times of day, they're locked. You can't enter into the gas station. You must be serviced through the speaker window.
Yeah, like
and
a
they'll
walk-up window.
and they have like a, if you buy something like an item or something from the convenience store, they'll slide it through other bins and compartments, but basically you don't even get access, which is another layer of safety measures that has us thinking, with restaurants, with banks, with our gas stations. It's like, okay, you serving us are being protected, but you're afraid of us. So there's a fear of who we are as a customer base. And if that fear is real, why wouldn't you want to protect me as well?
Yeah.
And that's the this incident is a very tragic example of that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that's the one thing that really stands out, is that somebody had the ability to lock people inside the building while they were behind bulletproof glass, right? So like they had a level of protection that people who were inside the store didn't have access to. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the training, that's something the council's looking at. I mean, they'd like to see perhaps, again, it's like, do we have the resources to do this?
And
what
that's
does that look
really
like, right?
that really is always the linchpin in most of these discussions, because there's so many great ideas that I hear at many of the sittings with our council. As frustrated as some of you all can be with council, some great ideas. It's just, how are these things enforced? And then when we really think about a lot of the ordinances, the progressive ordinances over years, I mean, we think of Joanne Watson, Marianne Mahaffey, we think of Ken Cockrell Sr. Like, there are some rules on the books that are just, Armand Henderson basically almost wrote most ordinances for Detroit. But back to, are we enforcing them?
Yeah. And I think there's a larger conversation we could have about the root of this problem, right? I mean, is who has the responsibility for preventing a shooting like this at a gas station? Is it a problem with the gas stations, or is it a deeper problem with gun violence that we have in the city? And that's kind of, the context that we were talking to the police chief in. And this is a really difficult, situation to handle as we get ready for the summer. He's really focused on trying.
As we're talking public safety and policing, you had another article recently about the judge upholding Detroit's contract for gunshot detection technology. Can you share a little bit about this and what's happening with this whole thing?
Yeah. So an impact on crime.
And not to mention, I mean, even here in Detroit, shout out to Keith Bennett and all the work that Keith has done. It would be incidents where, you know, firework go off, a car backfire, shot spotter have 4 or 5 squad cars showing up trying to prove that a gunshot was made. Because I don't know how familiar a lot of people are. This goes through the spectrum of the sound waves. So you know, I'm kind of into that world with podcasting and everything and my experience, but this reliance that technology can be non-biased is becoming more of a discussion throughout the world. But definitely locally. We think about the Detroit Digital Justice Coalition and all the work that they've been doing. Shout out to Tawana, Honeycomb Petty, and many others. Kimberly was someone I met at the discotheque the other day. And the belief in the way technology usually is presented is as if, you know, it's not going to be biased. It's just numbers. No, this stuff needs to be programmed and designed. And the programming and designing is not as intelligent, because that's what the term that they're using for technology nowadays, as presented. You know, it's no way to decipher that sound once it hits a certain peak and knowing whether it's a gunshot or knowing whether it's a firecracker or a firework. I mean, it's similar to what we have. And I think we as people have way better technology when we think of what we can hear. Definitely throughout the spectrum can be noticed. But as far as knowing and discerning what that is, that's going to be a human. But with this information and with that data, now it emboldens police officers to, you know, I would say impose themselves upon anyone's property. Looking to triangulate and use that technology of knowing where that sound came from. This is very dangerous, and it's very sad and unfortunate that this radical response to addressing the social challenges of gun violence is we're only looking to criminalize when we're not really looking to spiritually and holistically meet people with the resources of what's needed to address these issues. We're only looking to, you know, dive deeper into this criminal ideas, the prison industrial complex. You know, you're criminalizing the citizens by having technologies like ShotSpotter.
Yeah, I mean, we heard a lot of those, a lot of what you just said during the council meetings, you know, which spanned basically all of last summer as they debated this.
Yeah.
The lawsuit was filed after council approved these contracts, making the argument that the council failed to follow its community input over government surveillance ordinance. SIOGS is the term. I'll just call it an oversight ordinance, which basically had been created in response to the proliferation of different surveillance technologies in Detroit. You know, at this point, we already had green light, we already had facial recognition, all of that stuff. And it was an effort to basically ensure that if there was going to be additional surveillance technology, the community would be better informed about what this does. You know, what the civil rights concerns are, all the things that you're talking about there, who keeps the data, how do we make sure that it's not, you know, creating biased outcomes, how do we make sure it's protecting people's privacy, all of that stuff.
And that definitely comes, whereas, you know, my father, the CPA, also a developer, this company hasn't had any SOC reports. I don't think people are familiar with what a SOC report is. A SOC report will verify a clean SOC report is like almost like a audit of how you store your internet data. Because even if for everyone that has a home camera, and I don't know if people know this, but Ring doorbells owned by Amazon at this point in time does share their information with law offices. So that's local police, that's the state police, that is the FBI, that's the DEA, that is the IRS. Any government entity has access to your Ring doorbell information, but it still becomes not just the whole concept of the government having access to it. It also becomes to where this stuff is stored, because a lot of things that's looked at as this in the cloud, we make it seem like, oh, it's just in the air, it's in the cloud. No, it's somewhere, more than likely in some server station halfway across the world, like in the Eastern European bloc.
And people make money off it. I mean, we could have a whole conversation about
billions of dollars.
capitalism and people, you know, making money off of our our private personal
And
information.
that is
Made a lot of people
where
rich.
it's more so up to snuff of, how solid is the server capacity, especially when we think about a camera running 24/7 every day, and you want to go back. I mean, just loading off when you go to your backup format from like 1 month's worth of 24 hours a day, and if you have multiple cameras and all of that being loaded somewhere, clearly you're going to have a lot of breaches.
Yeah.
Of
And
where that data goes.
DPD has policies that say that the data created for ShotSpotter and other types of surveillance technology, like license plate readers, is another one that's kind of being debated right now as the police seek an expansion of that technology, which very similarly, they're posted at intersections throughout the city. They're always on. They take images of every vehicle driving by. And if you get a hit, if your license plate hits a hot list of cars that have been stolen, then that triggers an alert and so on. Anyway, DPD has policies that say, Detroit owns that data, but other law enforcement agencies have access to it. And there's been real concerns about, federal enforcement agencies like ICE having access to that data, as well as like third-party companies. I mean, it's kind of difficult for us to know. DPD, obviously says that it's not, but it's,
and it's, if we think of this in the capacity of a bank, it also gets back to, you want to share with them, but where is it stored? A lot of people, and maybe I'm going to do something like that through Detroit is Different, like to show people server farms and what a server farm looks like, where it is. It's usually like the high-end secure server farms. I believe there are some definitely in the West Coast where, you'll go through, maybe it'll be like concrete, maybe like 2 yards of concrete inside another building with more concrete. It's room and temperature controlled, and that's like high-end level, where you can store data. But then when you get to, all right, we're Detroit, we're DPD, we got Project Greenlight, we have, I'm lowballing it, let's say we have 4,000 cameras throughout the city of Detroit, always on play and always recording. 4,000 different cameras, 24 hours worth of film footage, right? That's HD footage. And I'm just telling you, you may look through just in the world of, if you do any video stuff, things like this, that may end up being, I'd imagine, hundreds of terabytes, maybe every other day. Right. So that hundreds of terabytes is going to be in what I call like in a like live active server space, probably for 30 days, similar to you with your Ring doorbell. You're like, okay, you can only go back 7 days because it needs to replenish the server capacity and space that you have access to.
Yeah.
And then after that 30 days, what happens to that data? Especially when we're thinking about a police officer and law enforcement, they may need to go back 3, 4, 5 years. Where is that being stored? And usually that's when we get into the running and gunning of, part of the data stored here, part of the data stored there, because these agreements that they're entering into are for the data, not for the backups of the data. But if the backups of the data take place on day 31, or let's just say day 32, then basically the backup data is just as important as the live access data, if not even more so important when we're thinking from a law enforcement perspective. These are the dangers when we think about where this stuff is being stored. And many people don't know. I mean, this is live. Sunday, it was a crash. Like, people are like, wow, my Instagram went out. What happened to Instagram? Well, Instagram is looking to expand its capacity to compete more so with Twitter, feeling as though they can welcome in some Twitter's users. But what they're looking to do when they're running tests, and oftentimes corporations do run these tests, are on Sunday afternoons. This is Instagram.
Yeah.
This is Facebook. This is Meta. The company Meta. So if Meta's having challenges connecting to a server space and server farm, with I know many more users, but if they're having challenges going to getting the server capacity and space, then think about whoever else is having challenges. Even Amazon itself. Like, I'm just on my run dropping game.
We're way outside my expertise.
But we need to, but it all comes together. Like, most people think that the money Amazon makes is like, you buy some toothpaste and they drop it off and deliver. most of Amazon's portions of the money that Amazon makes is based on having the server capacity. Amazon is the largest supplier of servers, but Amazon also does a lot of third partying out to what their cloud servicing does. Third partying could be Russia, Korea. It could be just like running and gunning and flying between places. And this is where data is always possibly compromised because this cloud that we speak of still goes to a real server. And then that server's access points then going to the internet. So as many things you need to go when you think about, okay, this is cybersecurity, making it clean and plain. So we're all in aware of this. You have data. Data is then stored in the cloud. You send files into like a loading dock, which is also a server. And then from that server, things are pulled down into wherever, like I say, like the quick access of the server. Then things are then taken to the backup. But you also have internet coming in and being an intermediary in that too. So you have an access point where you can be compromised through the internet. You can be compromised through your backup. You can be compromised through the data transfer. You can be compromised actually with pulling down data, which like it uploading and downloading. All of these are access points where information can be taken. Hence this goes into the intellect of like when we think of the artificial intelligence of a lot of this stuff and AI and video and can things be manipulated? That's a possibility too, which is another discussion. But I think this is all interrelated because now, as we see, public safety seems to consistently be an outcry of what people are looking for. And now it seems to be that our politicians and our government's response to this is let's have better technology without what I feel is a full understanding and transparency of the government agents, our politicians, our law enforcement officers, and also the general public to make a better understanding and decision of like, okay, we're thinking we're solving our crime problem by having better technology, but we may have opened up Pandora's box for so many more crime problems.
Yeah. And that's, that oversight ordinance was
as we wrap up to a close, because that's where we kind of at now, but I do want to add one other big key in this whole thing. The thing is, the police chief is a police chief. Policing is his thing. I do believe that he has some experience in counseling as well, and some of his background.
He was on the Michigan Civil Rights Commission too. Let's not forget the statewide civil rights organization. Yeah.
And I'm still trying to figure out exactly what the Michigan Civil Rights Commission and the Detroit Civil Rights, group does. I'm still trying to figure that out. As Khary Frazier, the citizen, like, okay, what is this doing? But here nor there. I say if you can get in there and shake some things up and make some things happen, great. But still, back to like everything, what capacity and what resources is the Civil Rights Board even being given to execute something? Whole nother discussion. And that's statewide, that's citywide, and that's even the federal government if they execute it. Let's give capacity to these groups, reparations group as well. But the intranet dynamic of it too. So you have the internet and intranet. Intranets are usually always government websites. So right now it's a lot of talk about ID.me and the IRS going on, and that relationship and what happens, meaning that if you ever, anytime you're dealing with a government website and sending an email to your city council person, your congressperson, you're dealing with the intranet because it's securely protected. A lot of this stuff that's stored in the cloud is not intranet protected. There is no government cloud-based server that is open for different ordinances and different committees and different groups, and as governments expand. I definitely know that the Department of Defense has a very expansive intranet, but that doesn't still seep over into municipalities, counties, cities, governments, and so forth and so on. Hence, when you take on different technologies like a shot spotter, you're going to be engaging a internet entity with an intranet entity. And that also leaves for many options for compromises. So through the internet going into an intranet, constantly things happen. So we can review, just Google search this. Atlanta was compromised before, where their city was basically taken a hostage by what people will label as hackers, but like a violent internet hack attack through these intranet connections. The city of Baltimore dealt with this. I want to say a couple cities in California where things are taken a hostage because, okay, through this connection, we can line in, and it may not even necessarily be to get the video data. It'll be to basically say, all right, well, now we can withhold all of the pension money. We see that the government's about to send some more ARPA funding to Detroit. We can commandeer that, and in exchange for X amount of cryptocurrency, we'll give it back to them. This is something that also happens often that a lot of people don't know about. But that exposure is there.
Cybersecurity too, I should mention. The city's got a big budget for that. I don't know. I couldn't speak to how effective that is, but it's something obviously we're concerned about.
But every time you open, it's like it's an exposure. It's me running the studio. Like, as people say, like, you're afraid of somebody stealing something. It's like, well, the exposure of something negative happening like that happens as I welcome more people in. Mm-hmm. Hence, entities like a shot spotter, intranet, every step. And I'm sure there are protocols, but as capacity for storing millions of terabytes worth of data that'll be needed for video, and now everybody's license plate happens, you're going to rely on more backups. And are you going into every step of the backup of the backup of the backup company? Probably not. You're probably just looking at the front-facing first company. You're not going to do a full SOC report and SOC audit, which is rare for any organization.
Yeah.
Right.
I just mean to say that the city's, sees this as a major problem. There's a risk management report that's done every year that basically lays out, here's, some of the different legal liabilities that we face and other things. And cybersecurity was one of like the biggest things that report talked about.
And so, many, because our intranet, if anybody's ever sent an email to the city of Detroit government, it's better than it was 10 years ago. But it's still antiquated because there are other security measures and protocols that need to take place. Most of this stuff is coded on a COBOL system, which now I'm getting into my real nerd stuff. But with all of that being said, how do people get in contact with you and where do they catch you?
Yeah, so everything we talked about today has been reported on at bridgedetroit.com.
You guys had a cool video with some sisters walking through their neighborhood. That's cool. Check out Bridge. Their friend of Detroit is different. And you already know Malachi will be back. We're going to always keep this thing growing. I feel like we're putting the seeds in the ground with public comment, but just like Detroit is different did, I feel we'll be in good flow by fall. So fall, when we paying more attention and we on the pulse, you guys going to get some good information out of here.
And I want to hear from you guys too. I mean, my email's out there. Go to the website, click on my, shoot me an email. Let me know how we're doing. I want to hear from Detroiters about, things that you guys think we should be covering, as well as, what are we getting wrong about, kind of the way that we're framing things. Always trying to learn more about that.
Oh, most definitely. Peace.